You know the feeling, not the message, the almost message. You wake up in the morning and something is sitting differently in you. Not quite hope. Not quite dread. Something in between, something quieter than both of those. And before you even reach for your phone, before you check whether anything came through in the night, there's already this low hum in your chest, like a frequency that's been playing all night while you slept. You look, nothing. But the feeling doesn't go away the way it would if the feeling were nothing. It stays. It pulses. And somewhere in the back of your mind, something you've learned to stop saying out loud. Somewhere back there you think, something happened for him last night. You don't say it. You stop saying things like that because there's no way to say them without sounding like you've lost touch with reality. But you feel it, clear as anything. Something moved. What if you're right? What if, at some point between 11 p.m. and 2 in the morning while you were asleep, he opened a message to you, typed something out, sat with it, and then closed it again? What if the words existed, fully formed, for 30 seconds, a minute, maybe longer? What if he wrote something true and then decided he couldn't send it? That's what we're talking about today. Not the messages that arrive, the ones that almost did. If you felt this in the last 48 hours, if you woke up this morning with the sense that something shifted in the invisible space between you and him, leave a like and subscribe so you stay connected to this channel. Drop "I felt it" in the comments to anchor what you already know. And stay with me, because what I'm about to explain is going to give language to something you've been carrying without a way to name it. Before we go any further, I need to speak to the woman who is tired of feeling things she can't explain and getting no answers. You felt the almost message. You felt 100 things in this journey that made no sense and turned out to be exactly right. What you need right now is not more general information about twin flames. You need someone to look at your specific chart, your specific sky, your specific timing, and tell you what the universe is doing with your connection right now. That is exactly what the personal reading is. Your birth chart, your twin flame energy, your current astrological window, mapped in detail and delivered to your inbox as a full audio reading and written report within 48 hours. The link is in the description. Order yours today. Okay, let's get back to the video. There's a gap between what he feels and what he does with those feelings. And that gap is not because he doesn't feel. It's not because the connection isn't real for him. It's because what he feels when he thinks about you has become, for him, one of the most overwhelming and disorienting experiences of his life. And he has learned very precisely to manage overwhelming things by not acting on them immediately, by creating distance between the impulse and the response, by doing almost everything except the one thing that would bring him relief. So here's what actually happens. He thinks about you, not casually, not the way you occasionally think about someone you used to know. He thinks about you in a way that stops him mid-motion, mid-conversation with someone else, mid-sentence in his own head. The thought of you arrives and everything else goes slightly out of focus for a moment. You know this because you feel it when it happens, even when you're nowhere near him. That's the thing nobody outside a twin flame connection would understand, and the thing everyone inside one knows completely. When he thinks about you like that, when the thought of you lands with that weight, the first thing that moves in him is not action. It's something more like a kind of internal flinching, a pulling back from his own feeling. Not because the feeling is bad, because it's too large. Because when he actually lets himself feel how much he feels, it creates this pressure inside him that he has no framework for and no practice managing. He's had his whole life to learn how to manage lesser things. This one he hasn't learned yet, so he doesn't text. He opens the thread. He looks at the last thing you sent. Maybe he reads back through the history. And then he starts to type. What he types is usually true, probably more honest than almost anything he says out loud to the people in his daily life. A few words, maybe a sentence, maybe more, something that admits, even partially, what's happening in him. And then he stops. This is the moment that matters, not the deleting. That's just the last step. The moment that matters is the one just before he deletes. The moment where he's looking at what he typed and his nervous system is doing two things at the same time. One part of him is feeling the relief that comes from having named something true. The same relief you feel when you finally stop holding something and let yourself admit it. That part of him is lighter for having put it in words, even in a draft, even privately. That part knows what sending it would mean. It would mean closing a distance. It would mean starting something he hasn't let himself start. It would mean stepping toward the most real thing in his life. The other part is where his entire history of emotional management activates. Everything he was ever taught about what it means to be vulnerable. Every time he reached towards someone and the reaching cost him something. Every learned pattern that says if you show this much of yourself, you will be exposed in a way you cannot control. And for someone who has built his sense of safety around being able to control how much of himself is visible, that exposure is the thing he fears most. Not you, not the connection. Himself fully seen. The scientific term for what happens in that moment is threat appraisal. His amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for evaluating whether something is safe or dangerous, is running a threat assessment on emotional vulnerability. And because the neural pathways for emotional vulnerability in him lead back to old experiences of pain, the brain reads the vulnerability as threat, even when the situation is safe. Even when you are safe, even when every part of his conscious mind wants to cross that distance. The draft disappears. He puts the phone down. Maybe he goes to do something physical, to discharge the energy of what just happened in his body. Maybe he distracts himself with something that requires no emotional presence. But the draft is gone, and he has managed the feeling the only way he knows how, by not completing the action. What he doesn't know, what he has no way of knowing, is that you felt it anyway. There's a specific window right now, not in a vague spiritual general way, in a measurable, astrological, your unique chart way. The sky today is doing something it hasn't done in 84 years. The Sun and Uranus are conjunct at the 1st degree of Gemini. The first time these two planets have met in this sign since 1942. And Uranus in Gemini is specifically about the breakthrough of suppressed communication. The things people have been unable or unwilling to say finding their way toward the surface. The locked channel opening. For twin flame connections, this transit hits the communication cord between you and him directly. Not just in general, but in the specific geometry of your individual charts. Where is this conjunction falling in his natal chart? What planets does it aspect in yours? Those answers change what this means for you specifically. How close is the timing? What the window looks like? Whether the almost message becomes a sent one and when. This is exactly what a personal reading covers. Using your birth chart as the foundation, a reading maps the current sky against the specific blueprint of your connection. The energy between you and your twin right now, the blockages still active in him, the karmic patterns coming due, what your soul contract actually says about where you are in this journey. Not in general, for you. Here's what I know about the woman sitting with an almost message she can feel but didn't receive. You don't need more validation that it's real. You need to understand the timing. You need to know what this window means for your specific connection, not as a concept, not as a general transit reading, but as a precise map of what the universe is doing with you and him right now. The reading is an audio file delivered to your inbox with a full written report to return to. Provide your full name, date of birth, time of birth, place of birth, and country of birth at checkout. Delivered within 48 hours. The link is in the description below this video. If the almost message was last night, and the feeling this morning is what I think it is, this is exactly the moment to get your chart read. Here's what's happening in his nervous system that makes this pattern so stable and so hard for him to break without something shifting at a fundamental level. The brain forms what neuroscientists call neural firing sequences, patterns of activation that become habitual through repetition. When a particular trigger activates a particular sequence enough times, the sequence starts firing faster, more automatically, with less conscious participation. It becomes what researchers call an implicit procedure. Something the system does before the conscious mind has fully caught up. For him, the neural firing sequence that gets triggered when he wants to reach toward you has been reinforced many times over the course of this separation. Impulse to contact, recognition of vulnerability, threat appraisal, withdrawal, relief through distance. That sequence has fired so many times that by now it runs quickly, quietly, almost without his awareness. He doesn't experience it as a choice anymore. He experiences it as simply what happens. But Uranus doesn't negotiate with well-worn neural sequences. That's actually the function of this planet in astrology, and it maps almost exactly to what neuroscience calls pattern interruption. The sudden introduction of something that doesn't fit the established sequence. Something that forces the system to pause, recalibrate, respond differently. Uranus transits, particularly conjunctions to the Sun, create pressure from the inside, not external change. Internal pressure toward change. The part of him that knows what's true becomes harder to suppress. The cost of maintaining the old pattern increases. You've probably felt this in him lately. A restlessness, an edge. Something in him that seems close to a surface he's been successfully staying under. That's not your imagination. That's the pressure of a planet doing exactly what it does. Mirror neurons add another layer to this. The human nervous system is designed to resonate with people we're closely attuned to. In twin flame connections, this attunement operates at a level that researchers studying interpersonal neurobiology have begun to document, even if the specific context of twin flames isn't something most researchers are working with directly. What Alan Shore describes as right brain to right brain communication. The nonverbal, non-conscious transmission of emotional states between closely bonded individuals is a real neurological phenomenon. What it means for you is that his internal activation last night, the drafting and deleting, registered in your nervous system without anyone telling you about it. You felt the impulse and the withdrawal in sequence, which is why you woke up with that particular frequency. Not hope, not dread. Something that felt like both a door opening and closing in the same breath. Now here's the part that matters most for you. While he is opening drafts and closing them, while his nervous system is running that suppression sequence, while he is managing his way back to the distance that feels safer, you are in a completely different process. And the quality of that process is the thing that determines what comes next between you. A lot of women in this stage of separation are doing one of two things. They're either actively monitoring, refreshing, watching, waiting, arranging their emotional state around the question of whether contact is coming, or they've swung to the other extreme, performing a detachment that isn't fully real yet, telling themselves they don't care while still quietly tracking every synchronicity. Both of those are understandable. Both are signs of a nervous system that hasn't yet found its groundedness. What the current transit is asking for is a third option. Not monitoring and not performing detachment. Actual occupation of your own life. So complete and so genuine that when contact does come, and the sky right now is creating real pressure toward that, it lands in a you that is fully present in your own experience. Not a you that's been waiting, whose entire emotional state has been organized around the arrival. This matters not just emotionally, but energetically. The twin flame dynamic responds to the gravitational field of the divine feminine's consciousness. When she is genuinely full, genuinely occupied in her own becoming, the pull she exerts on the connection changes character. It stops being the pull of need and becomes the pull of completeness. Those two things feel entirely different to him on the receiving end, even if he couldn't tell you why. The first one activates his flight response because it asks him to be her source. The second one activates his longing because it reminds him of what's possible. The Uranus-Sun conjunction in Gemini is a Gemini energy, which is inherently about two things being true at once. He is almost reaching and also not reaching. You are connected and also fully separate. The almost message is real and also not in your hands. Both things are true simultaneously, and the capacity to hold that without collapsing into one side of it is exactly the spiritual work of this stage. He drafted it, he deleted it, he felt you even as he withdrew. And somewhere in the space between the draft and the deletion, something moved between you that a text message wouldn't have captured anyway. The transmission happened. The walls moved, even if they didn't come down. His suppression sequence is not going to break because you do the right thing. Let me say that clearly, because a lot of women in this journey exhaust themselves trying to find the action that will finally unlock him. The message that will land right. The space that will feel like enough. The exact combination of presence and distance that will make it safe for him to come forward. It doesn't work that way. His pattern breaks from the inside. Specifically, it breaks when the internal cost of maintaining the suppression becomes higher than the internal cost of the vulnerability. When holding the draft and deleting it stops giving him the relief it used to give him. When the distance that once felt like safety starts feeling like loss. When what he's managing away from begins to feel more essential than what he's managing toward. That shift happens on its own timeline, but Uranus speeds the timeline. Not by removing the pattern, but by increasing the internal pressure until the pattern can't hold the same weight it used to hold. From a Jungian perspective, this is the archetypal function of Uranus transits in the individuation process. The shadow material, the parts of himself he's been unable to integrate, the parts that include his capacity for genuine emotional presence and real connection. Those parts don't stay suppressed forever. They push toward consciousness. The more strongly they're suppressed, the more forcefully they eventually emerge. Jung called this enantiodromia, the tendency of something pushed to one extreme to reverse into its opposite. He has been running from this connection for a significant amount of time. The reversal is not just possible. It's the only psychologically inevitable outcome. Something the workbook was built for is exactly this middle passage. The place you're in right now, where you can feel the movement but can't verify it, where the evidence is all internal and all invisible, where you need a way to track your own transformation rather than track him. The Twin Flame Journey Tracker and Progress Workbook is 39 pages of exactly that. Not another explanation of twin flames, you have those. A system to document your own movement. The stage tracker that tells you where you actually are versus where fear says you are. The synchronicity log that stops you from forgetting the moments that matter. The monthly reviews that show you, in your own handwriting, how much has shifted even when it doesn't feel like it. The daily check-ins that keep you as the center of the story, not him. You've been doing the work. This is the tool that proves it's working. Link is in the description. What you do with this passage, the one where his drafts stay drafts, the one where the connection is moving faster than the external evidence suggests, the quality of your own internal life during this window, that is the twin flame work, not waiting for the message. Being so genuinely in your own life that when it arrives, and it is coming, it finds a version of you that is already whole. The almost message last night was real. The frequency you woke up to was real. And the sky today is creating the kind of pressure inside him that doesn't stay contained indefinitely. Hold your ground, do your work, stay in your own life with everything you have. There is something I want to leave you with that often gets skipped in conversations about this stage. The almost message is not a failure, not his and not yours. It is a data point in a longer arc. Every time he drafts and deletes, the impulse to reach was still real. The feeling that generated the impulse was still real. What gets weaker over time with these Uranus transits is not the feeling. It is the suppression of the feeling. The deletion gets harder. The draft gets further along. The moment between opening the message and closing it gets longer. You cannot see any of that. You only see the silence on your end. But the internal process is not static. It is in motion. And what the sky is doing right now is applying pressure to that motion from a direction he did not see coming. The Sun conjunct Uranus in Gemini is not a gentle invitation. It is a hard light on the suppression itself. It illuminates the cost of the unsent message in a way he cannot fully reason his way around. This does not mean he sends it tomorrow. It means the cost of not sending it has increased. There is a point in every twin flame journey where the divine feminine stops measuring her progress by his external movement and starts measuring it by her own internal reality, by how grounded she is, by how honest she is being with herself, by whether she is actually living her life or organizing it around the question of him. That shift, when it becomes genuine and not a performance, is the most powerful thing that can happen in the dynamic, not because it magically makes him move, because it changes who she is on a level he can feel even across silence. The channel between you is not closed, it never was. He is just learning, slowly and with great difficulty, that opening it is safer than staying silent, and that the silence has its own unbearable cost. The almost message last night was real. The frequency you woke up to this morning was real. And the sky today is creating the kind of pressure inside him that does not stay contained indefinitely. What he is learning, the sky is currently teaching him whether he asked for the lesson or not.